I think Doremi's been infected by Leonard from the last episode. We got an opener that had a frame rate about as consistent as No More Heroes 3, whilst also foreshadowing later events in the episode. Obviously, it was going to involve trains, as even all the boys in the Ojamajo's class were looking at photos of some.
男の子って列車とか車とか好きだね。
I'm not too interested unless they're part of a combiner team. Though as it turned out, Ompu was far more knowledgeable than any of them, including knowing about their dining cars and OGs. Well, great, now I'm gonna have another face that's gonna haunt my nightmares. Though she wasn't exactly a train otaku or anything, but rather the daughter of a conductor who was inviting his kid to the first ride of a new train.
I like my keys in there. Get a rock.
Her mother, of course, wouldn't be able to make it due to work, but Ompu was determined to see her father. As we already kind of knew, she hardly saw him, though at least now we have a good excuse for it because of his job. However, at the same time this was going on, Ompu was trying to land the part of a little sister character for either a remake or a sequel to a famous TV drama. Yeah, just get that joke out of the way. And as you likely surmise, these two plot points would end up kind of clashing. Still, the solid build-up to it was very nicely done, as Ompu's body language hinted at a sense of insecurity as she probably knew what was coming. Good stuff that even the Ojamajo managed to pick up on. Anyway, at the auditions, Ompu didn't exactly have much in the way of competition, except for, in her opinion, this one girl.
置いていかないで。結構上手だったわよ。
Are you sure about that?
I mean, okay, she wasn't bad, but I just think there's a good reason why this VA hasn't had many roles outside of this franchise, and not even for the same character all the time. Granted, part of that might have been because Kain, not Karen here, was suffering from stage fright, though it didn't excuse the VA's slight stiffness when trying to talk casually, but I digress. Ompu, depending on your interpretation here, was either being her usual smug self, or as I more personally lean towards, was purposely egging Kain on, having been impressed by her potential. Again, a really nicely done subtle scene here. Anyway, not too surprisingly, the final auditions turned out to be on the same day as her father's train ride, but for now it seemed like she'd be able to make both.
Yeah.
She also invited the Ojamajo to watch because I guess this is one of those auditions where audiences could participate, even though I'm pretty sure that would just throw off the actors, like in Kain's case. For her, it seemed to run in the family, with her father also having suffered from stage fright, and possibly hinting at some genetic neurodivergence. Of course, Ompu, having rarely seen her own father, could relate, especially when a flashback is this well directed. Seriously, while the layering here is actually quite technically simple, it's still quite emotionally effective thanks to the timing and music. Though of course, Kain had to drop the emotional bomb as she revealed what happened to her dad after he landed the role in the original version of the show they were auditioning for.
クランクイン寸前に病気で倒れて、そのまま天国へ行っちゃった。
Ah, Jesus, you think you can warn a guy next time you're gonna pull that sort of mood whiplash? Granted, it was easy enough to predict this twist, but geez, way to use your excellent direction to still deliver a hell of a gut punch there, y'all. And the great direction continued into the next scene. I especially love the shot of Ompu literally in the spotlight to emphasize her usual tendency to keep the attention squarely on her. And yet, you could say it was ever so slightly off, as though a certain other young actress's words were still ringing in her ears. Speaking of whom, I like how, conversely, the lights weren't focused on Kain, with her even initially coming out onto a dark stage. It really emphasized her inability to focus as the stress was really getting to her. Feeling bad for her, Ompu decided to use her black magic for good this time by curing Kain's stage fright. Though this turned out to be the last straw for her charm, as it broke after she cast the spell. So yeah, I guess removing stress counts as brainwashing, though maybe you could have just have asked to lower her cortisol levels. Yeah, one of the commenters brought up a possible explanation about how Hazuki managed to make Mr. Seno tell those lame jokes in episode 47 and not count as brainwashing, that the magic forced his vocal cords to move in ways to make him say them. I guess that makes sense, though it does make me wonder how much more could the Ojamajo biologically manipulate their victims? Actually, never mind. Too much of that stuff might lead to a zombie apocalypse. As a result of her intervention, Kain ended up tying with Ompu, forcing them to go into overtime, which of course meant that she might not make her train ride, not helped by the fact that the clocks there were clearly broken since they switched from 4:30 to 3:30 between these shots. Of course, Ompu did have the option of just dropping out and letting Kain win, especially since she wanted to see her father, who appeared in a very similar flashback. However, after hearing her rival state that she also dreamt of going head-to-head with Ompu, well, then she had to stick around, both for her own pride and Kain's, which, yeah, in some ways were kind of one and the same. I mean, it's obvious, the two shared a lot of similarities, with the one big exception, of course, being that Ompu still at least had her father in her life, even though he wasn't around all the time. Thus, seeing someone trying even harder than her for a similar parental figure was pushing her to not only refrain from using magic to cheat like she usually does, but even technically give Kain a slight advantage. And again, some amazing subtle storytelling during this climax through the usage of the stage light, which, yeah, kind of looked like sunsets, didn't they? In the end, of course, Kain won after both gave it their all, and Ompu accepted her defeat with no regrets. Well, except for the whole train thing, and yeah, she couldn't bail herself out with another spell as the last one used up all of her spheres. She revealed all of these details to the Ojamajo, who were more than willing to help her after hearing about her good deed. Thus, they used the magical stage to teleport her onto the train in a cool, though kind of mind-trippy transition.
How did you get here? Where are you right now?
Well, anyway, the episode ended on a very happy ending for Ompu, with a nice inclusion of the show's opening, meaning that I'm sure nothing bad is gonna happen from here on out. This was arguably one of the best episodes of this first season. I mean, there was just so much great storytelling and direction that I couldn't even make a lot of my usual snide remarks or jokes. It just didn't feel appropriate. I mean, yeah, there was some decent comedy here, as usual, mostly from our title character, but it's hard to even acknowledge that stuff when there's just so much great and clever direction here that really showed the best side of a character who was otherwise introduced as a little brat. Still, it was a really good showing for Ompu and a great closer to her arc, because I'm sure nothing bad is gonna happen from here on out. Well, there is the issue of her charm. Storyboarding and direction for this episode was led by Shigeyasu Yamauchi, who previously gave us the quite unique episode 39. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still thought it was a good episode, but also mostly a comedic filler with often some very obtuse comedy. Still, he's an excellent minimalist director, as shown in stuff like one of my favorite episodes of Cowboy Bebop, Black Dog Serenade, that he storyboarded. Again, while what he's doing here is nothing all that technically impressive, I could recreate some of these transitions just with my basic editing knowledge, how and when he uses them makes the scenes all the more effective. Helped by the fact that in spite of the show's title, this is mostly just a two-character story between Ompu and Kain. Sure, the Ojamajo were there, but they only really played into things at the very end. As a result, we got a much more intimate story about a couple of young actresses dealing with their absent father issues. And while both were reconciling in different ways, they also had to acknowledge that they weren't too dissimilar from the other. Thus, even though challenging and even helping her at one point went against her goals, Ompu wanted to see their little rivalry out to the very end. As a result, she did end up losing her charm, but also got some good karma from the Ojamajo. It's a great self-contained story about two rivals bringing out the best in the other that again, I'm sure won't affect the plot going forward. But yeah, overall, with some excellent direction, especially during that climax with all of those freaking spotlights, this was easily one of the strongest showings for this season. Ompu was undoubtedly an amoral little brat when she first appeared, but through some good character development, I think she's grown past that and managed to take a good bow in the end. So yeah, going forward, I think this is the new format we're going to stick with the mountains in the foreground and all that. Frankly, one was meant to deal with the Japanese companies suddenly becoming lawsuit-happy jerks. I've personally grown to kind of like it and think it adds a unique touch to this channel. Don't worry, you won't have to look at mountains all the time, especially when we review manga, so look forward to part 2 of the Tropical Rouge Doujishi review coming soon. And until then though, for now my friends, and oh, my train's here. Hey, can I get a little extra cream with my coffee today?